The year was 1885. German engineer Carl Benz had produced the world's first car powered by an internal combustion engine. After this invention that would change the world, Henry Ford, who was the chief engineer at Thomas Edison's electric company in America, was working tirelessly in his workshop at night to produce his own internal combustion engine automobile. Being a mechanical genius, Henry managed to develop his first car, the Ford quadricycle, after 2 years of hard work in 1892. Henry saw great potential in this new industry, and encouraged by Edison, founded his first company, the Detroit Automobile Company, in 1899. However, the vehicle Henry developed for transportation, which resembled a horse carriage, resulted in a big failure. The founding investors blamed Henry Ford for this failure and forced him out of the company. The American inventor had to leave his own company, had no intention of giving up. This time he developed an 8-horsepower model for personal use. Later, in 1901, with the support of new investors, he founded the Henry Ford Company. The model was so successful on sales. As the company's chief engineer, Henry Ford was spending most of his time to develop race cars. In the early 1900s, racing was very popular among the public and was crucial for inventors and automobile manufacturers to gain reputation. However, Ford's obsession with racing cars and his excessive focus on them bothered the other investors. Therefore, they hired successful inventor and engineer Henry Martin Leland as the company's chief supervisor. Henry Ford, so offended by this decision, left his company and a year later established the Ford Motor Company on his own. Martin Leland took control of the company and renamed the company Cadillac Automobile Company, inspired by the French explorer Monte Cadillac. Henry Ford's vision was to produce affordable car for the masses, while Leland thought the opposite. He wanted to produce luxury vehicles for wealthy customers. Cadillac developed its first car in 1902. Although based on Henry Ford's design, the engine was developed by Leland. Within 5 years, Cadillac became the first American manufacturer to produce a fully enclosed body car. During that period, Cadillacs were the highest quality and most durable cars in the market. In 1908, two major investors, William Durant and Charles Maud, founded General Motors and began acquiring car manufacturers and suppliers under one roof. General Motors purchased Buick, Pontiac, and Cadillac within a year. As part of General Motors, Cadillac became the leading producer of luxury cars. One of the biggest issues affecting driving comfort at that time was starting the engine. Drivers had to crank a lever multiple times from the front of the car and then quickly jump into the driver's seat to engage the ignition. Besides being comfortless, the crankshaft caused many injuries. In 1912, Cadillac revolutionized the industry by producing the Cadillac 30, the world's first car with an electric starter and buried manual crankshaft to history. This innovation doubled sales of Cadillac within a year. In 1915, Cadillac introduced a luxurious 75-horsepower V8 engine car capable of reaching speeds of 65 miles per hour. While the Ford Model T was priced at $520, the Cadillac was sold for $2,300. By then, driving a Cadillac had become a symbol of status. During the 1920s, Ford dominated the American market. With the world's first moving assembly line, Ford was producing 2,000 cars a day. Ford was far ahead of other manufacturers. The Ford Model T, priced as low as $260, became the people's car and was selling like hotcakes. By 1927, the 15 millionth Model T rolled off the assembly line. However, the model had remained almost unchanged for 20 years and only sold in black color. Henry Ford, obsessed with production speed, insisted on black color because it was the fastest drying paint. However, customers were now demanding cars in various models and colors. Henry Ford ignored customers' demand, responded to a journalist about this issue by saying, "Any customer can have a car painted any color that he wants, as long as it's black." In the 1920s, Ford's market share was 85%, while General Motors held just 15%. Although GM had multiple brands like Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, and Pontiac, it couldn't compete with Ford's dominance. In 1920, General Motors hired Alfred Sloan, a successful CEO from the ball bearing company, as new CEO of the company. Sloan realized that the only way to compete with Ford was to do what Ford wasn't doing. Unlike Ford, GM would meet demands of customers by offering cars in various models and colors. At the time, cars were designed by engineers focused purely on mechanical performance. In 1926, Alfred Sloan created the first design department consist of designers in automotive history. As a result, General Motors brands released multiple models in various colors, took great demand from the American people bored of driving the same black Model T for 20 years. Especially Chevrolet sales skyrocketed. Sloan's strategy was successful. For the first time, General Motors broke Ford's market dominance and became America's leading car brand. This strategy also adopted Cadillac. In 1926, Cadillac introduced one of the most luxurious cars of the time, with a 16-cylinder engine, while most cars on the road had 4 to 6 cylinders. It had featuring innovations like radio option. Cadillac continued to dominate the premium segment with its aerodynamically designed luxury cars in mid-1930s. In 1937, the most expensive Cadillac was introduced. When World War II broke out in 1939, Cadillac, known for its great engines, shifted its focus to manufacturing engines for American aircraft and tanks. The United States emerged from World War II as a global powerhouse, had an economic boom. The purchasing power of the people had significantly increased. Harley Earl, General Motors' chief designer, decided that cars needed a fresh style to match the new era and capture public interest. Aircraft had played a critical role in the war, and Earl was inspired by the design of planes like the P-38. He decided that car designs should resemble aircraft. Prototypes were created based on this concept. Earl also realized that tail fins, inspired by aircraft wings, could be adapted into the design. In 1950, Cadillac's new models were unveiled at the auto show. The American public fell in love with these enormous, futuristic designs. The Cadillac DeVille rewarded the Car of the Year in the United States. Designers also added chrome rocket-shaped parts to the front and rear bumpers. Thus, Cadillac started rocket age in the automotive history. Cadillac was further its competitors by offering luxury features like fully automatic transmissions and air conditioning. The American public loved the new rocket-designed Cadillac models, and demand skyrocketed. By 1949, the 1 millionth Cadillac had rolled off the production line, with an annual capacity of 100,000 units. Seeing Cadillac's success, rivals Chrysler and Lincoln had no choice but to adopt similar design language. By 1955, Cadillac's annual sales had surged to 140,000 units. In comparison, Lincoln, owned by Ford, managed to sell only 35,000 vehicles annually. Cadillac had become the big leader in the luxury segment. The brand's most luxurious model, the hand-built Cadillac Eldorado, was priced at $80,000 in today's money. Models like the Fleetwood and Eldorado were massive, powerful vehicles, with up to 300 horsepower. Throughout the 1950s, owning a Cadillac was a symbol of status. The brand had fully shaped American car culture. Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler all adopted the rocket age design pioneered by Cadillac, releasing models like the Ford Thunderbird, Ford Fairlane, Chevrolet Bel Air, and Chrysler C300. American roads became filled with huge, flamboyant cars with tail fins and chrome bumpers. As the years passed, dimensions, tail fins, and bumpers of Cadillacs got bigger. In 1957, the limited production Eldorado was launched, featuring air suspension, power seats, power steering, power door locks, power windows, an automatic trunk, air conditioning, and an automatic parking brake. It was the most luxurious car of its era. The special edition Eldorado was sold for $123,000. The rocket age was sweeping America. Cadillac, Chrysler, and Lincoln engaged in a fierce competition to create larger tail fins. Cadillac, excelling in design, updated its models every 2 years. In 1959, the fourth-generation Eldorado was introduced with even larger fins, and a power output increased to 350 horsepower. American elites, movie stars, singers, professional athletes, and even presidents preferred Cadillacs. By the 1960s, Cadillac's designs began to simplify, adopting straight lines. The tail fins started to get smaller, and by the late 1960s, the exaggerated fins and chrome bumpers were nearly gone. However, power continued to increase, with some models reaching up to 430 horsepower. Cadillac remained the dominant force in the luxury market, selling around 200,000 units annually. Yet, trouble was brewing for the American auto industry. Until the 1960s, American manufacturers had completely dominated the domestic market, as European and Japanese manufacturers were still recovering from the war. American manufacturers had grown focusing on shiny designs rather than engineering and safety improvements, assuming that anything they produced would sell. In 1965, Mercedes-Benz entered the American market, offering cars that were far superior in engineering compared to American vehicles. Mercedes models combined luxury, comfort, and driving pleasure while being more efficient and safer than domestic vehicles. For the first time, Ford and General Motors faced serious competition from foreign brands. Then in the early 1970s, the oil crisis started. A severe gasoline shortage hit the US, and fuel prices skyrocketed. People struggled to fuel their massive, inefficient vehicles. Also, purchasing power of public decreased because of economic downturn. And American dream was over. People shifted towards smaller, fuel-efficient cars. At this critical moment, Japanese brands Toyota and Honda entered the American market with models like the Toyota Corolla and Honda Civic. These economical, durable, and fuel-efficient cars sold rapidly, dealing a massive blow to American brands. Ford and Chevrolet were forced to introduce smaller, fuel-efficient models, similar to those offered by their Japanese and European rivals. Cadillac was slow to adapt to this changing market, but managed to keep high sales until the late 1970s. However, mounting pressure from the U.S. government to produce more fuel-efficient vehicles forced Cadillac to downsize its models starting in 1978. Cadillac's once revolutionary designs became ordinary. In fact, Cadillac's models began to resemble Chevrolet cars, so paying thousands of dollars extra for a Cadillac that seems like Chevrolet became unreasonable. To compete with Mercedes, BMW, and Audi, Cadillac introduced its smallest model yet in 1982, the Cadillac Cimarron. However, it turned out to be a massive failure, selling only 15,000 to 20,000 units annually. The Cimarron was almost identical to the Chevrolet Cavalier, took many criticisms from Cadillac fans. In the early 1980s, General Motors began using shared platforms across its brands, meaning that multiple models from different brands were built on the same production lines. This led to different models from Cadillac, Chevrolet, Buick, and even Opel having nearly identical designs. The goal was to reduce costs, but this strategy backfired as customers saw no difference between luxury Cadillacs and budget Chevrolets. By 1990, Cadillac's market share in the luxury segment had dropped from 31% to 22%. By the late 1990s, local rival Lincoln managed to surpass Cadillac for the first time in 60 years. However, in 1999, Cadillac made a comeback with the luxury SUV Escalade, competing with the Lincoln Navigator, Mercedes, and Range Rover. Although the Escalade was a hit, Cadillac's golden era was long gone. With its market share dropping below 7%, Cadillac fell behind Mercedes, BMW, Lexus, Tesla, and even Acura. Still, when the name Cadillac is mentioned, the iconic designs of the 1950s and 60s continue to come to mind.